Good evening. We have two meetings tonight. First is the Cunningham Town Board, and that will be followed by the regular meeting of the Urbana City Council. I'd like to call the meeting of the Cunningham Town Board to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here. The first item is public participation. Is there anyone who would like to address the Cunningham Town Board? I don't have any cards here. I have a lot of cards for the next one. Okay, we'll move on. The item is minutes of the previous meeting. We have November 2nd and November 23rd, a special meeting. Is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Ammons to approve the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? That motion carries. Next, we have the Committee to Verify Bills. Michelle Mayall, Supervisor.
The December bills, including November interim, town fund is $55,019.09, and the general assistance fund is $15,824.99.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Smythe, seconded by Roberts. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries. Michelle, reports of officers? Okay. Unfinished business, we have the tax levy, fund balance, and budget projections. I do have a correction to send out. One of the tables that I did, it said that the fund balance was 9 times the annual spending, but it's actually 7.3 times. So has anybody had a chance to look at this? Do you have any questions? Basically what I did was try to take a look at the proposed levy in view of what we had been told, that it shouldn't be more than, it shouldn't be as high as 2.8 times the actual spending.
That wasn't told to you by me. That's somebody's misunderstanding.
Oh, okay.
My statement was that the Illinois Supreme Court, in which that occurred, said that was not a guideline. That referred to the specific facts of that specific situation only. There is no such guideline.
So, because I thought you had said that there was no specific guideline, but they just said it was higher than what was necessary or proper.
No,
Did
they
they
said
say that?
in the particular facts of that case,
Okay.
they thought that amount was too high, and of course it would vary from fund to fund and from time to time, but the important point that was made is that there is no guideline.
Okay,
There's
there's
no number.
There's no guideline, because usually, you know, cities have roughly 10% of, but that's a different type of revenue structure, obviously. But anyway, I did take a look at the town fund and the general assistance fund, just to take, you know, see what this would play out for maybe 5 years, because it's very hard to set a levy without knowing what's going to happen in the future. And Charlie had suggested adding maybe 70,000 or so to the town fund for social services. So I plugged that in to see how that would affect the levy. And if you end up deciding that in the budget, which is yet to be done, I would recommend that you increase the levy. I would just put it out there for like $120,000 increase. But then looking at the general assistance fund, which is on page 3, the one I just handed out, that one, the ending fund balance for this coming June, I think is going to be 7.3 times the annual spending. And so I thought we could you could, I don't vote on this obviously, lower that levy more than enough to make up for the increase in the town fund, so we could lower the overall one. And one of the goals of the city is obviously to get the overall tax rate down. So I think you could lower it 2 cents, or if you don't want to add the additional social services, you could lower it a net amount of 3 cents. But I think you need to raise the town fund, and it looks to me, at least, that you could lower the general assistance fund. And Elizabeth Hannon put together charts, graphs, which are easier to read than charts, just to show you how this would play out over time. And she has what she's done for the city, which is the what we want the balance to be and what it actually is. And she's saying the balance, a reasonable amount, would be 125% of the spending, because their main source of revenue is property tax, and it only comes in basically twice during the year, so you want to make sure you have enough money every month. So you don't have to act on this tonight. It would be acted on next Monday. It turns out we're under the same, the township is under the same law. Bill, you have a question?
Thanks for having these done. I think it helps a lot understanding kind of the long-term impact. On page 5, with the assumption of expenditures increasing 10% annually, I wonder how you came to that. Is that just kind of a random decision?
It's not a random decision. What I was trying to do is be very conservative. On the town fund, I had it go up 3% a year, but since Michelle had indicated there's some uncertainty about general assistance, I had it go up 10% a year. And I also asked Michelle, because she mentioned about the possibility that the town might have to pay more for Medicaid. So I asked her what that was, and she thought it might be $100,000 a year. It wouldn't start in January of 2017, but I was being conservative, so I put $50,000 in that year, and then another $50,000 in the next year. Okay. So I think they're pretty generous estimates. So somebody else had their hand up. Oh, Michelle, maybe? Go ahead.
Yeah, I still have not been able to figure out how you come up with the 7.3 times greater than the spending, because we're not going to have 7 times greater in our surplus than what our expenditures are at the end of this fiscal year. There is no way.
Okay, well, I was just assuming that your expenditures went up 10% from last year.
Well, all of that's been put into the budget that was passed at the July meeting. It has the estimated expenditures and the estimated ending balance. So when you look at that, and then you look at the spreadsheet that has the town fund and the general assistance, the expenditures, according to the budget that was passed, the expenditures for the general assistance is listed at $252,000. And if you look at the budget without the Carl money, it's $542,000.
I understand that you're talking about the budget, but I looked through the budget, and there's a big variation between what is budgeted and what is actually spent. So that number that you see for this year is based on 10% more than what was spent last year. So I don't know. I mean, I did send it to you for your comment, so.
Right, but when the numbers didn't match, then, I mean, I've looked at this for 2 months now, and really, if you want to increase the levy, you're only going to be able to do it in the town fund. The GA cannot be touched by the board in the levy or the budget or anything. You cannot lower the GA levy to increase the town fund levy.
What? I guess my question, I got your email, but my question on that would be, why does this board even vote on it if they don't have any power to
Because you
change
can
it?
up the town fund levy or decrease it, the town
Well,
fund portion.
Okay, so you don't want them to vote on the general assistance levy then?
You
Well-
vote on the levy, and I thought this was set out in detail in the email that I sent to the supervisor, and I understand she sent it on. This isn't my opinion, it's the opinion of the Illinois Appellate Court and the Illinois Supreme Court. They said that your statutory obligation is to adopt the overall levy, but they said the two levies are different, You can do what you wish with the town fund levy, but you have no authority as the township board to vary from the levy for the general assistance fund set by the supervisor. And it can make sense or it may not make sense. I wouldn't suggest that all statutes or court decisions make sense to me. That's clearly what the Illinois Appellate Court has said, and the Illinois Supreme Court has adopted that position, and it has even been cited by the federal court.
So
as
what does the actual law say?
What's the law? I just told you what the law says.
Okay,
That's what the
well-
Illinois Supreme Court says the law says.
Okay, well, I would think if they're saying that this board, I don't vote on it, but if this board can't vote on it, that is a law that needs to be changed.
Well, that may well be true. I
Okay,
think
we were told last week that the truth in taxation law did not apply to the township, and that turned out not to be true, so.
No, that's not at all what was said last time. The truth in taxation law does not require a publication by the township this particular year because it requires a publication when the increase in the levy is more than 5% over the previous year's extension. The whole purpose of the special meeting 2 weeks ago was to meet the requirement of the truth in taxation law and determine the amount of the levy so that it can be determined whether or not a publication of a tax increase of over 5% needs to be made in the newspaper. Since the increase was essentially zero, I don't know to the penny what it would come to, no publications required. But I didn't say it doesn't apply. I said there is no requirement.
I didn't say that you said it. We were told that.
Oh, well,
Okay.
I don't know who said it, but it applies
there's
to
a
all
video
taxing
of the meeting.
districts. Whether the publication requirement applies in any particular year depends upon whether the amount of increase exceeds 5% over the previous year. And, it may well be that it would be a good idea to amend the statute, but at this point in time, that's what the appellate court and the Supreme Court says the statutes require.
Okay. Anybody else? New business, do we? Okay, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think these projections are good and they seem to be accurate. I just, and I'm willing to accept the fact that we can't change the general assistance fund levy, but I'd want the supervisor to explain why she's in favor of continuing to accumulate several $100,000 a year into that tax fund that we aren't spending.
We've discussed it many times, that is the program that we're mandated by law to provide. We're not mandated by law to provide social service funding, and that is pretty much what this is all about. So when the Affordable Care Act disappears and we are required to pay the client's medical again, then I don't want to be caught with no money. And, I don't know. It's my decision. I've been, every time I have brought a budget and a levy to the board for the past 2.5 years, it just seems like, nothing is good enough. Everybody wants, or not everybody, people want to change stuff, and I'm the township supervisor. I was elected to this position, and I am very sure that I am doing my job very well with already saving the taxpayers well over $300,000 in 2 years. So for me to have to sit here meeting after meeting and keep justifying myself is really getting a little old. There's no trust, there's no respect, and I email everybody, I don't hear from everybody, and then you just want to bombard me at a meeting and I don't bring everything with me. So, it's a mutual respect that is not there. So I've explained it, and, not wanting to be mean and rude, but it's been done time and time again, and I know you're tired of hearing it as much as I'm tired of saying it.
I'm sorry you feel that way. I don't mean to not respect you. I'm just, it's just, I mean, and I believe in discussing things in meetings. I mean, if there's a question about figures, we can talk about that outside. But when it's a discussion about what the levy should be and how many times, how much should be reserved and things like that, I think it's worth discussing at meetings. So I don't mean any disrespect. And I appreciate your answers, but I just point out that even in our, the recession was in 2009, 2010. The township was hit worse, it looked like, in 2011, 2012. We were paying out $700,000, $800,000 a year in general assistance. So I understand that. Now we're paying out, $300 or less. So there can be a big swing. But even with that, I think it's worth looking at the numbers, and if you disagree with the social service funding, I appreciate that. I still would emphasize that when I talked about asking you to join in our social service allocation process last week, I hope you will, because I think you can bring a lot of value to that. Most of us up here, 7 out of 8 of us up here, including the mayor, study like 1,500 pages worth of grant applications every year. And you talked about before how you wish you understood more about what those grants went to. So I hope you do join us in that process, and I hope that we can incorporate your thoughts on how to allocate that spending.
There is $100,000 in there for social service. We've kept that in there. That has not been removed.
Right, and I just appreciate you weighing in on the process of allocation, not just agreeing to do what we ask you to as far as social service funding goes, but actually to get into the grant allocation process and help us with that.
Okay.
Dennis?
Yeah. So I guess just to kind of look at it, over the last couple of years, you've been able to tighten up the general assistance allocations by reviewing the cases and finding out those individuals who truly require those, and maybe individuals who did not qualify. And we appreciate that. So the number of general assistance funding clients has decreased pretty consistently over the last 2 years. And yet, I guess the question is, wouldn't then it be useful for the taxing body to lower the general assistance fund in accordance with that downturn and graph, rather than to continue to build the fund higher and higher? And wouldn't it be wise to make a smaller allocation in the coming year, and therefore save the taxpayers some amount of money?
It's easier to estimate the expenditures in the town fund, and that's what I did. That's what I do every year before I do the levy. So it's the unforeseen and the general assistance fund, but the town fund, if you choose to raise or lower that, then the town board has that right.
You don't see any logic to my comment about if the graph for general assistance clients has declined and the outlay has declined, wouldn't we see some downturn and a savings to the city, to the population, by the collection of a little bit less tax? Wouldn't that make sense? I mean, wouldn't that be a useful and sensible direction to take?
It would be, and I've not raised the levy for 2 years either, but I could look into lowering the levy, but there is, on the GA side, but there is nowhere near 7.3 times in reserves of the township. There is about probably a year, almost 2 years in GA and a year in town fund.
Okay, and I didn't come up with the figures.
I know, I'm just
but
letting
we're
you know
those
what
figures
is
in
there
our
as a.
discussion. So, but one of your concerns is that if we lower the general assistance funding, that there's going to be a bump up required in a few years because of an assumed change in Medicare funding.
The Affordable Care Act, yes.
And so the assumption is here that national Medicare is going to hit a brick wall, and we're all going to be left holding a bag, and you don't want to be holding a bag.
Exactly.
So this is crystal balling the future
Yeah.
evolution of Medicare. Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Okay, gotcha.
Eric?
Well, it's not exactly pure crystal balling. Under the present arrangement, that the federal contribution will sunset in what, something like the middle of 2017, yeah. So that would be the projection based on present law, as opposed to, sort of guessing at how the law would evolve. Now, there's a chance that it'll be extended, but, maybe the most prudent thing is to base it on the projection of the current law. I do have two other questions, if I may. One is just to a legal question related to tax caps. If the general assistance levy were to be lowered, and it were discovered that put us in some danger zone with respect to meeting our obligations, would tax caps prevent us from raising it again, or would we be free to do that? And I guess that's really directed to Fred.
If you lower your levy, that can affect your ability in the future to levy the amount that you want. And that's under the existing tax cap law. There is a bill in the legislature, a new tax cap bill. I've read it. Just reading through it once is hardly enough to understand something like that. They don't make much of an attempt to make it clear. But the overall idea is to create further restrictions. I see also there was information provided by the county clerk's office where they have considerable expertise on this subject, talking about lowering it would not be able to capture inflationary increases in tax extensions due to rising property values with tax caps as they exist. You can get the benefit of like new developments and so forth that get added to the tax rolls. The only thing I can tell you about the pending tax cap bill is that the idea is to further restrict it, add more levies to what are limited by the tax caps. So I think it's a legitimate concern, but I don't think anybody can give you a precise answer right now as to what kind of effect it has, just that it's a legitimate concern that tax caps would be a problem if you lower your levy. Not that that's the reason not to lower your levy. I'm just trying to answer your question.
Right, sure. Yeah, no. That, and then I have a question for Michelle, and this is based on an email exchange we had. And apparently, I had not been aware of the law with this in this respect, but apparently, if I understood our exchange correctly, people who have been in prison and they come out, they're no longer eligible for general assistance. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
It is for people that are convicted of a Class 1 or a Class 4 drug felony.
Uh-huh.
And that is state. We can't
Right.
change it, the...
Right, but that's right, and that means like
So it's not all felonies.
Okay, Class 1 or Class 2 drug felony, and that's for the rest of their lives.
Correct. No welfare. They can receive, the link card, and they can receive medical. They can receive no cash from the welfare system in any part of Illinois.
And what is do you have an estimate of how many people in the township might fall into that category who might otherwise be eligible for township assistance but are prevented from it by this?
I don't have an estimate, but I can tell you it's less now. Most that are coming out of the county and that are coming to the township it's like theft, and it's not drug-related charges.
But it's not zero. There are some people probably in this community who are in that situation.
I would assume so. We just have not seen one in a while.
Okay. I guess I'll just make a comment then, now that, since we've clarified that, is that, and I realize it's a long process to change state law, but we ought to figure out if there is a way to provide equivalent assistance, somewhere in city or township budget to people who are in that situation. I just think it's crazy. I think that's really in the category of like brain dead, like really increasing chances of recidivism.
Well, I do know that the township officials of Illinois who provides our manual, they are working on a revision. So if you would like to, speak with them, now would be the time, because I believe they're planning on having a new manual out in April, and that is one of the sections that they are addressing, but I believe they're adding to it to include child molesters, murderers, rapists, those type of felonies also.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
So TOI is working on a new manual now.
But what we were talking about is statutory. So they're talking about asking the legislature to add additional categories.
Or the state is already working on that. They work in
Right.
conjunction with each other. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. That's a concern.
Aaron?
So, Michelle, do you know what the average GA expenditure has been for the last 5 to 7 years? Before Affordable Care Act, what were you spending?
I sent that out. In medical, were you asking?
Yes.
Or are you talking medical and
Well, I'm talking medical at
personal
this point because
allowances?
you said that was the biggest savings, and that would be what you were sort of preparing for the sunset. So I'm trying to see exactly if we have an average of what you've been spending for GA for medical over the past 5 to 7 years. And I'm looking specifically for before the Affordable Care Act.
In 2010, it was 127,326. In 2011, it was 214,657. 2012, it was 173,081, and in 2013, it was 198,800.
And that's before Affordable Care.
Correct.
So, but you haven't. So when the Affordable Care Act came in, you didn't have to spend any of that
That's what we spent.
with the Affordable Care Act.
No, that was before the Affordable. Oh, you're talking about after the Affordable Care Act kicked in, what we've spent? In 2014, we spent $90,195, and then in 2015, we spent just over $1,100.
So just kind of going along the lines of what Dennis was talking about, as you prepare for the sunset, then that means that you're going to pay, on average, the township will pay for medical somewhere around $250 to maybe $300,000 a year.
I would say between 100 and 150 at the current caseload.
Okay, and the surplus at this particular point is
About 1.8.
so. Certainly, we could, or you have the authority to lower the levy, because even if it sunsets in 2017, there's no way that you're going to spend that amount of money.
Correct.
Okay. So now you said something about us being able to do something with the township fund, right? But
The
not
town
the GA,
fund part.
the town fund.
Correct.
But I thought you said earlier that the levy that you set as the supervisor dictates, it sets it's the levy for the township, the town fund, as well as the GA. Is that correct?
The supervisor proposes the levy. Cunningham Township happens to have two funds. Other townships have more. Many townships have a road fund, some a cemetery fund, hospital fund, and so forth. And township board has the ultimate say on the amount of the levy and on the budget and appropriation, except for the general assistance fund. So while the supervisor has provided her numbers for these two funds, the one number that you are required to accept and adopt is the levy for the General Assistance Fund. The other levy, and if there are more levies, all the other levies, you have the authority to change.
So just for the sake of clarity, to make sure I'm crystal clear, then there are two levies that are going to be set, one for the general assistance and one for the town fund. And we get to determine what the town fund is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And you agree with that, Michelle?
I
didn't
agree
think
with the
so.
figures I submitted, yes.
Okay. Because I'm trying to understand how we're going to, if you set the levy, which dictates the entire pool of money, then how does that, when you set the levy, it generates a certain number a certain figure, which will be used in the general assistance and the town fund. Is that correct?
No.
No. Okay. I just
The
wanna make
only
sure that-
number you have to go with is the number she provides for the General Assistance Fund. So the overall levy you can change because you can change the town fund part of it.
Okay.
And it's separated out on the ordinance, Aaron,
Okay.
the different amounts for each fund.
Anyone else on this?
I had one last question in relationship to the number of people. So you changed some things as far as who's able, who qualifies and who doesn't, right?
I didn't change things.
Well, you went through the roles and you were able to determine that some people weren't qualified.
Correct.
So I was just wondering how many people have been denied, who have applied.
I would have to look in the denial book that's at the office.
So, but the number has, you have any general idea of how many?
No, I'm not the caseworker.
Okay.
I don't keep those statistics. It's in a specific book at the office.
Okay.
Okay, any more on this topic? Mike Madigan.
So, how much is will the town fund levy generate this year?
Total,
Mm-hmm.
1,303,358.
Okay.
Same
And
as last year.
So, does the township board have the ability to reduce the town fund in order to achieve our goal here of actually, or the mayor's goal of reducing taxes, thereby forcing a spend down of general assistance funds in the form of a transfer to the town fund?
GA, you cannot transfer money out of GA into
Okay,
town
so
fund.
that's
You
not
can do it the
possible?
other
All
way.
right. So, in other words, the town board is basically strapped. We are in a position where we get to approve one fund, and the other fund we just have to agree to. Is that the way the interpretation of the law is here?
Correct.
Okay. And the current balance in the general assistance fund is 1.8 million, the surplus?
Halfway through the fiscal year.
1.8
That's the balance, yeah.
1.8
So-
million, okay. What do you anticipate are the expenditures through the rest of the fiscal year?
It will probably go down to 1.5, 1.6.
Will you receive any more revenue this year?
We will.
How much?
Well, we've received our last distribution. So
Okay.
what we get in May and June is what goes for the next fiscal
Sure.
year.
So you're at a 1.5 or 1.6 million dollar surplus for the year.
Correct.
Okay. So at, let's argue the smaller number, not argue, let's just use a smaller number, 1.5. You suggest that in 2 more years, Obamacare goes away, and we will be on the hook for another approximately 150, let's even use a bigger number of 200,000. So at the current rate, it would take us how many years to exhaust the surplus that we have today?
You don't want to exhaust the surplus.
Hopefully we wouldn't exhaust the surplus. I mean, but I don't know.
If we keep the same levy Well, arguably, we're going to grow the surplus because we're overtaxing the township at the rate of expenditure that we have today. So I don't see any justification for you to suggest that you should not accept the mayor's recommendation to reduce this tax rate because you have a $1.5 million surplus of taxpayer dollars. There is absolutely no reason to keep taxing people at this level. Here's the thing. The town board can increase this levy in future years to more than offset any kind of unforeseen loss or unforeseen negative cash flow. I see absolutely no reason for you to dig your heels in here and to not accept what the mayor wants to do here, which is to give a little bit of tax relief to the citizens of Urbana, the people of Cunningham Township, which are one and the same, who now pay 25% more in property taxes than the city of Champaign. I think you need to look at this in terms of the overall impact to taxpayers and not just what we're talking about here in terms of the township. This is a very important distinction. And we are not talking about turning anyone away for any kind of township assistance by reducing this levy. But what we are doing is providing some very much needed relief to the taxpayers of this city.
Diane?
Along that line, I actually had a question. What does it mean to the taxpayers? Our overall tax rate is $10.60. So a 2-cent decline in the tax levy is less than 0.2% decrease in the tax rate. A 3-cent decline in the tax levy is less than a 0.3% decrease in the tax rate. So for a person who owns a $200,000 house in Urbana, currently is paying $7,066 in taxes, property taxes at the current tax rate, a 2-cent decline would be $14 a year. That's the amount of relief we're talking about, which is not a whole lot of relief. I mean, if people want to relieve property taxes, we need to change the school funding formula.
Dennis and then Mike.
I'm just going to say that so far, the city of Urbana and the township potentially are the only people on the board in the ballpark who are even talking about possible tax relief. Everybody else is happy to levy the high levy or increase their levies. You look at every single taxing body, and that's contributing to the property tax general levy in general. And in this building, in this room, are the only people that have even considered making some kind of reduction or trying to at least keep the level low. It'd be great if the supervisor of the township could contribute to that in some degree.
Mike? Did you want to say something, Mike?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we will move on. New business?
Well,
Oh, Diane, go ahead.
what is the next step?
The levy needs to be adopted next Monday, December 14th.
The levy as proposed.
Right. Well, I mean, you can change the town levy, but apparently you're not allowed to change the general assistance levy.
So it's the one in ordinance number T
Yeah.
2015-11.
We passed a resolution that was essentially saying what the estimated levy was, but you need to wait 21 days, so that's why we're putting it off until December 14th, the same night that we're going to adopt the city tax levy.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no new business, we'll move on to item 8, closed and open sessions to consider. Mr. Grosser?
I checked at about 5 o'clock to see if there had been any decision filed by the appellate court in the Carl appeal, and there had not been. Decisions are filed as late as 5:30, which doesn't mean there was one filed, but I checked it several times a day. I want to be one of the first to know,
Okay.
and I'll let you know as soon as I know something.
Did you want to say something, Eric?
So does that imply that there's been absolutely no change since the last time we met? No change in the situation. That is, everything is on hold and while we're waiting for the decision. Okay.
Okay, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.